So the politics in France over Islam has taken a voice turn. So I'm going to discuss those debates in this episode. So after the Macron's very obvious speech that Islam is in crisis and Islam needs enlightenment, just like the Christianity received an enlightenment in the Europe. So essentially he was saying that the radical Muslims is posing a grave threat to the secular ethos of the nation, and as the president of the French nation, he is morally bound to make some reformation in Islam. So after this controversial speech, then barely 1 week after, middle school teacher Samuel Paty was murdered, and he was accused of portraying the caricature of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a compromising position. So this was the reason for his murder, and this has angered one of a Muslim student who is ethnically belong to the Caucasus region of Russia, and he migrated to the France along with his family. So after this debate, the wide-ranging discussion has been ignited, not only in France but in the entire Western continent, as to how to assimilate the Muslims into the ethos and the culture, or particularly the secular ideals of the West. So here I'm going to discuss how the Muslim-centered or Islamophobic threats by the mobs or by the security agencies and by the government will drive a wedge in assimilating the Muslims, assimilating the already vulnerable Muslims into the French community. So we know the French houses one of the largest population of Muslims in the European continent, and it includes around 6 million population, and it's roughly amounts to 10% of the total population in the France. So in the recent days we can see under the Marine Le Pen, the far right politician, the attacks against the Muslims have set an alarming tone, and the far right parties taking the law into their hands, and the mob lynching has become the norm of the day. So these things we can see the parallel in India also. In India, mob lynching or the public harassment of the Muslims by Hindutva voices we can see. So we can draw a parallel between the both incidents. And after the speech of the Emmanuel Macron that Islam is in crisis and Islam needs a reformation, two Muslim women wearing hijab and clad in hijab were hatcheted in front of the Eiffel Tower, and this gives an assumption that Muslim identity is in grave threat in the West, and especially in the France. Now let's come. So we often hear that the Macron says that the Constitution of 1905 is in threat. So what is the Constitution of 1905? So we can hear that the France suffered from the clergy, from the papacy, and their enlightenment led to the separation of politics and religion, and their harsh version of politics and religion came through the Constitution of 1905. We can see that there is a strong, very hard compartmentalization of religion and politics in France, where a state is not supposed to favor any religion, and the religion should not interfere in the daily matters of the state. So strong compartmentalization we can see between the state and religion, and this is the same feeble ground that is often incurred by the French authorities to limit the freedom of the Muslims and the Muslim society in the France. So here a rereading of secularism, and especially a secularism that can accommodate the minorities, the multi-ethnicity of people, have to be done in this background. So we can see the Islam is perfectly compatible with secularism, and whether it's secular Indian secularism, that is positive secularism, the Western secularism, that is negative secularism, or any other form of administration and government. So here the problem is the far right people have advanced the theory of great plunge or a great replacement to alienate the Muslim cause and to put the Muslim identity in danger. So the problem is here, if this trend continues to grow up, then what will happen? So it will lead to the social, cultural, and more importantly the economic alienation of the Muslims of the French, and this will make the case of already impacted Muslims more vulnerable. So the authorities have to make very concerted efforts to accommodate the Muslims and then mitigate the fears that's running through the veins of the Muslim community, that they are being targeted specifically for holding on to the religious views. So here, when we come to the issue of hijab, and which was banned in the government and public spaces, and those who wear hijab have often incur the wrath of the authorities. So here, how we can accommodate the Muslims and secularism into the European context is very important. So I am keep saying always, so the radical fringe Muslim elements may be a cause for concern or eyesore for the government for their militant political Islamist views, but it could not be generalized to all the Muslims, because Muslims as such don't support the militancy, the violence, and the political interference in day-by-day affairs of the state. But this should be limit for the freedom of expression and for the blasphemy law, and for denigrating the others' respect and others' religion. So in this aspect, if the government continues, the centrist government continues the tirade against Islam and the Muslims, and it will lead us to a social discontent among the Muslims, and that will have a wider repercussion across the France, and which will affect the minorities of the nation, and the government should not toe the lane of the far righteous parties across the Europe, and it is the high time for the France to accommodate the minority Muslims into their culture.